I thought I'd show you 3 ways I like to use when I want to keep it fresh in quick battles. And one of them is the randomly generated faction pick. So I'm going to put in the number of factions I have in a random number generator. You can just search for that on Google. And then I'm going to let the random number generator decide which faction I get. So if I get 3, for example, then I'm getting Armenia, and that's the faction I'm going to use regardless of what my opponent picks. So that can make for some unusual and random matchups. Another way of picking factions is to have what I call faction a day. So today my faction is going to be Arabachi, so I'll be uploading 3 Arabachi battles. And regardless of what my opponent picks, I'm going to pick Arabachi. And when you do this, you are probably going to get counter-picked a lot, which can make for some interesting battles, because your enemy will try to hard counter Arabachi, and then you have to make the Arabachi work against an army that is specifically suited to fight the Arabachi. So that can be pretty challenging. Another thing you can do is that you can ask your opponent to pick your army for you. So just ask your opponent if he'd like to try playing against a certain faction. If he doesn't have any wishes, just tell him to pick a number between 1 and the number of factions that you have. If you have all the DLCs, it's going to be 32. If you don't have all the DLCs, it's going to be less. Or just ask him to name a faction, and that's the faction you are going to use. So what I noticed was that I tended to pick my favorite factions a lot in quick battles, and there were some factions that I basically never used. So another way, a 4th way, is just to pick one faction. Start at the top and then work your way down, or start at the bottom and work your way up, so you get some nice experience with all the different factions against many different kinds of builds. So those are some ways that I like to pick factions for quick battles, and it makes it more difficult, it makes it more challenging, but it's certainly better than, let's say that I pick the RDA, for example, and then my opponent says, okay, he picks RDA, so I'm going to counter with Rome. Then I say, okay, well, fuck it, I'm not going to play Rome as the RDA, because they're just going to sword spam me to death. So I'm going to go for a faction that is better able to counter Rome. So I'm going to go for Pontus, and I'm going to go for chariots and shock cavalry and such. But then my opponent says, okay, I'm not going to play Pontus as Rome, because Pontus has a chariot. So instead I'm going to match Pontus by picking Egypt, because then I can bring chariots and I can bring a lot of javelins and good mid-tier swords. And then you can have this going for quite some time with just picking and counter-picking, and that can be pretty boring. So you're putting yourself at a slight disadvantage if you use these random ways of selecting a faction, or if you just pick one faction and you're going to play that faction for the entire day, or for 3 games or something like that. But it can make for some very interesting battles, and you will get experience with using builds that are at a disadvantage against enemy builds. So try it out sometimes if you think that quick battles are not challenging enough. Tell me how you like it. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you again on the battlefield with randomly generated factions.